When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time.
This is an ad from the Canadian province of Ontario, the most populous province in the country, quoting former President Ronald Reagan at length, extolling the perils of protectionism and tariff.
In the crisp autumn of 2025, a single television advertisement rippled across the border between the United States and Canada, igniting a firestorm that halted trade negotiations and escalated tariffs overnight. On October 23rd, President Donald Trump, fresh into his second term, took to Truth Social to declare an abrupt end to all ongoing discussions with Canada. The culprit, he claimed, was an egregious ad funded by Ontario's provincial government, which dared to invoke the voice of Ronald Reagan to decry American tariffs. What began as a provincial pushback against perceived economic aggression quickly morphed into a national standoff, underscoring the fragile balance of North American commerce in an era of resurgent protectionism. To understand the depth of this rift, one must rewind to the roots of U.S.-Canada trade relations. For decades, the two nations have been each other's largest trading partners, exchanging over $700 billion in goods annually under frameworks like NAFTA and its successor, the USMCA. Yet, tensions simmered during Trump's first presidency, marked by steel and aluminum tariffs that strained alliances and prompted retaliatory measures from Ottawa. Returning to the White House in 2025, Trump doubled down on his America First agenda, imposing tariffs on Canadian imports to address what he viewed as unfair advantages in sectors like dairy, lumber, and automobiles. These moves were framed as necessary defenses against dumping and subsidies, but they irked Canadian leaders who saw them as blunt instruments harming integrated supply chains. Enter Ontario Premier Doug Ford, a populist conservative with a reputation for bold maneuvers, who spearheaded a counteroffensive aimed at swaying American public opinion. The advertisement in question was no ordinary political spot. Airing during high-stakes events like the World Series, it featured spliced audio from a 1987 radio address by President Reagan, where he warned against the perils of protectionism. Reagan's resonant baritone intoned lines about how tariffs burden consumers and stifle prosperity, positioning free trade as the engine of economic growth. Ontario's government, under Ford's direction, edited the clip to laser focus on Reagan's anti-tariff rhetoric, omitting context where the Gipper himself advocated for targeted protections against unfair foreign practices. The ad's narrative painted U.S. tariffs as relics of outdated thinking, urging viewers to pressure policymakers for open markets. Ford's office defended the production as a creative appeal to shared conservative values, hoping Reagan's iconic status would resonate south of the border. But the move backfired spectacularly, crossing into what critics deemed manipulative territory. Trump's reaction was swift and unyielding. Labeling the ad fake and a misrepresentation of Reagan's legacy, he accused Canada of fraudulent tactics. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute swiftly weighed in, condemning the selective editing as distorting the former president's nuanced views on trade. Reagan, after all, had balanced free market ideals with strategic safeguards such as quotas on Japanese motorcycles and voluntary export restraints on autos, measures that protected American industries without descending into full isolationism. The Foundation's rebuke lent credence to Trump's outrage, framing the ad not just as political theater, but as an affront to historical accuracy. In a flurry of posts, Trump terminated negotiations aimed at refining USMCA provisions, particularly those addressing digital trade, environmental standards, and dispute resolutions. To underscore his resolve, he slapped an additional 10% tariff on Canadian imports, effective immediately, targeting key exports like energy, vehicles, and forest products. Ford, undeterred at first, leaned into the controversy. In interviews, he boasted that the ad had achieved its goal, garnering billions of views and thrusting the tariff debate into the American spotlight. No regrets, he declared, portraying himself as a scrappy defender of Ontario's economic interests against Washington's heavy hand. The province, Canada's industrial heartland, relies heavily on U.S. condor markets. Auto plants in Windsor and Oshawa feed into Detroit's assembly lines, while lumber from northern forests bolsters American construction. Ford argued that unchecked tariffs would devastate jobs on both sides, inflating costs for everything from pickup trucks to home-building materials. Yet, as pressure mounted from federal counterparts, he announced a pause in the ad campaign on October 27, signaling a desire to de-escalate and reopen dialogue. This pivot came after consultations with Prime Minister Mark Carney, who emphasized the mutual benefits of cooperation amid global uncertainties like supply chain disruptions and energy transitions. From Ottawa's vantage, the fallout carried broader implications. Carney, a former Bank of Canada governor with a steady hand on economic levers, warned of ripple effects for consumers on both sides of the border. Higher tariffs could drive up prices for gasoline refined from Alberta oil sands, winter coats made with Canadian wool, and even maple syrup staples in U.S. grocery aisles. Economists projected potential losses in the billions, with integrated industries like aerospace and pharmaceuticals facing uncertainty. Canadian officials expressed optimism for a quick thaw, pointing to historical precedents where bluster gave way to bargaining. Recall the 2018 renegotiation of NAFTA into USMCA after similar tariff threats. Yet, Trump's track record suggests no easy concessions. His administration views tariffs as leverage to extract concessions on issues like fentanyl smuggling via Canada and border security. As talks remain frozen into late October, whispers of retaliatory measures from provinces like Quebec, a dairy powerhouse, add layers of complexity. This episode reveals deeper fault lines in bilateral relations. Canada's economy, resource-driven and export-oriented, is uniquely vulnerable to U.S. policy shifts. Over 75% of its exports head south. For Trump, tariffs embody a philosophy of reciprocity, countering what he sees as decades of lopsided deals that hollowed out American manufacturing. The Reagan ad, in this light, wasn't mere provocation. It struck at the heart of ideological kinship between conservative leaders. Ford, a self-styled heir to Reagan-era toughness, gambled on invoking the icon to humanize the trade war's human costs. But in doing so, he underestimated the personal animus tariffs evoke for Trump, who has long championed them as tools of national revival. Analysts note that while the ad's editing drew valid criticism, Reagan's full speech balanced criticism of tariffs with praise for fair trade enforcement, its core message echoed bipartisan concerns about inflation and consumer burdens. As winter approaches, the standoff tests diplomatic resilience. Ford's willingness to halt the ads hints at pragmatism, prioritizing jobs over optics, while Carney's government navigates domestic pressures from industries pleading for stability. In Washington, Trump's inner circle signals no rush to the table, using the impasse to rally domestic support for Buy American initiatives. The irony lingers. Two nations bound by geography, history, and intertwined fortunes, divided by a 30-second clip from 4 decades past. Resolution may come through back-channel talks or mutual recognition of shared vulnerabilities. But for now, the border feels a touch colder. This isn't just about tariffs. It's a reminder that in trade, as in politics, words, especially borrowed ones, carry the weight of empires. The saga also spotlights evolving media strategies in international disputes. Provincial ads targeting U.S. audiences mark a departure from traditional diplomacy, leveraging digital virality to bypass federal channels. Ford's team crafted the spot for maximum impact, timing it with baseball's playoffs to capture millions of eyeballs. Yet, the backlash illustrates the risks of historical revisionism. Reagan's estate and admirers viewed it as sacrilege, amplifying Trump's narrative of Canadian overreach. Broader context includes ongoing USMCA reviews, where disputes over labor standards and intellectual property linger. Without swift negotiations, sectors like cross-border trucking could grind slower, echoing pandemic-era snarls at Windsor-Detroit bridges. Ultimately, this flare-up underscores the perpetual dance of sovereignty and interdependence. Canada, often cast as the polite neighbor, showed teeth through Ford's gambit, while Trump's response reaffirmed his disruptive style. As economists crunch numbers on potential GDP hits, perhaps 0.5% for Canada, fractions for the US, stakeholders on both sides yearn for equilibrium. History teaches that such spats rarely sever ties. They refine them. Whether this leads to tougher USMCA terms or a tariff truce remains unseen. But one thing is clear. In the arena of North American trade, invoking Reagan's ghost proved a bold, if bumpy, path. The coming weeks will reveal if dialogue triumphs over discord, preserving the economic lifeline that binds two great nations.